Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, Parvarajikacharya, Asatara Satashri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai, Mathura Dhama Ki Jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai, Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskachade Shatarane. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvoitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kipasindhavyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's June 18th, 2025 in New Govardhana, Australia, and we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 23, Devahuti's Lamentation, Text 42. And this is, again, describing Kardama Muni's traveling all over the universe with his wife. Kim Durapadanam Tesham Pumsamudama Chetasam Ya Ashritastirta Padas Charano Charano Vyasanatyaya. Please chant. Pumsamudamachetasam Yair ashritas tirthapadas Charano Vyasanachaya Kim Durapadanam Tesham Pumsam Sudanachetasam Yair ashritas tirthapadas Charano Vyasanachaya. Ladies. Kim Durapadanam Tesam Pumsamuda Chechasam Kim, what? Durapadanam, difficult to achieve. Tesham, for those. Pumsam, men. Udanachetasam, who are determined. Yai, by whom? Ashritaha, taken refuge. Tirtapada, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Charanaha, feet. Vyasana achaya, which vanquish dangers. Srila Prabhupada's translation. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. So why do you think that this statement is being made? There's just been this description of Kardama Muni traveling all over the universe in this flying city practically with his wife. So why do you think there's this statement? What's difficult to achieve for these people? Well, if you're teaching, okay, you're teaching somebody, and you're teaching a class, and you're describing, there was this yogi millions of years ago that made a flying city, and he flew all over the universe with his wife. What would you figure the audience might be thinking? Exactly. What would they be thinking? Yeah, they're thinking, yeah, right, sure. So therefore, this is understanding that people are going to have this doubt. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The words Yair, Ashritas, Tirta Padas, Charanaha are significant here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Tirthapada. The Ganges is called a sacred river because it emanates from the toe of Vishnu. The Ganges is meant to eradicate all the material distresses of the conditioned souls. For any living entity, therefore, who has taken shelter of the holy lotus feet of the Lord, nothing is impossible. So that's the main point here. Kardama Muni is special, not because he was a great mystic, but because he was a great devotee. Therefore, it is said here that for a great devotee like Kardama Muni, nothing is impossible. Although yogis can perform wonderful feats, as Kardama has already displayed, Kardama was more than a yogi because he was a great devotee of the Lord. Therefore, he was more glorious than an ordinary yogi. As is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, out of many yogis, he who is a devotee of the Lord is first class. What verse is that? Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antarapana shradhavam bhajate yomam samayuktatamam matah. For a person like Kardama Muni, there is no question of being conditioned. He was already a liberated soul and better than the demigods, who are also conditioned. Although he was enjoying with his wife and many other women, he was above material conditional life. Therefore, the word vyasanatyaya is used to indicate that he was beyond the position of a conditioned soul. He was transcendental to all material limitations. Kim dura padanam tesham pumsam udamachetasam yar ashritas titar padas charano vyasanatyaya. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. So our scriptures, and indeed all the scriptures of the world in any religion, they're full of fantastic stories. They're full of fantastic stories that we don't experience in our life. Correct? Yes? Chaitanya Charitamrita, not quite as much. I mean, I remember, so Prabhupada, produced the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was working on that. It was produced in 1975. So we had a hot off the press account. We were getting Prabhupada's books as he was translating them. And I was in the process of reading the third and fourth canto when the CC came out. And then I stopped and I was reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I thought, this is more relatable. I had a little bit of a difficulty relating to Kardama Muni and Devahuti because I've only taken a plane from one earthly city to another, haven't gone into outer space with a spaceship that could have gardens on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was like, what does this have to do with me? It was a little difficult to relate to because I haven't had any experience like that. Whereas in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I felt like almost I was reading about other temples in ISKCON. Of course, even there's some fantastic things like Mahaprabhu planting a mango seed and it immediately grows into a tree and immediately produces mangoes without or very thin skins or no skins and no seeds. And one mango would satisfy a person. So there are some things like that, but not so absolutely amazingly fantastic. The problem is that if we doubt that these stories are historically accurate, then we may throw out the whole Shastra. We may just say, okay, I'm going to reject the philosophy of the Shastra. So, again, this is the case for every single religious tradition of the world, and it's the case for every old culture of the world as well. But actually, even in our ordinary life, there are many extraordinary things. We just may not talk about them that much or hear about them that much, but there's a lot of extraordinary things within our immediate or pretty immediate sense perception. Yes? And we have to admit that God can do anything he wants. That's sort of the definition of God, which is what's being referred to in this verse. Well, God can do anything, therefore his servant can do anything. Of course, that doesn't mean that our everyday activity and faith should depend on expecting miracles. That generally, as devotees of the Lord, we expect that we're working within the known laws of material nature. All right, so even in our ordinary life, there's so many miracles, right? Isn't it? As we said, all the scriptures of the world, all the ancient cultures of the world, talk about fantastic things. All of them. It's something universal. And many times these fantastic things are parallel, like a worldwide flood, which the scientists can't figure out how that could possibly happen, how there could be enough water in the world. But that's, again, every ancient culture describes that, and there's even some archaeological evidences. And you might say, well, these are all just superstitious beliefs of people who weren't very scientifically sophisticated. But the scientists also describe fantastic things that nobody has seen. Just like with evolutionary theory, and they're describing reptiles turning into birds, but no one has any experience of reptiles turning into birds. Our experience is that species give birth to offspring that are like themselves. And we have no experience of some sort of intermediate form. I mean, their whole explanation is fantastic. If it's a true explanation, it's certainly a fantastic one. And they're talking about how different species will get an improvement in response to their environment, and then another improvement and another improvement. But when you look at the difference between one form and another, many times like an eye, if you don't have all the parts of it, it doesn't do anything. And so there'd be no evolutionary advantage in having a part of an eye. You follow what I'm saying? So if, some creature somehow had some mutation and got a part of an eye, why would it persist if it didn't give any kind of living advantage? And then you add another part that again has no particular advantage, and another part that has no advantage, and eventually you end up with a whole system that has a huge advantage. So that's also a fantastic story. If we said, I can put a bicycle outside at the ladies' ashram, there's a bicycle in the parking lot that I think we should photograph as a piece of artwork. I'm not quite sure why it's there, but it's being gradually overcome with vines. Yes, this looks very artistic. But no one expects it to evolve into a motorcycle. Nobody thinks one day we're going to go in the, you call it a parking lot or a car park? Car park. Okay, you have some Britishisms and some Americanisms. So you don't expect to go out in your car park and find, oh my goodness, it's now a motorcycle. And you certainly don't expect to see it gradually transforming into a motorcycle. Like, oh, the wheels have changed. Now there's a part of a motor. Now another part of a motor. Oh, now there's another part. Oh my goodness. So these are fantastic stories. And they're stories that no one experiences in their daily lives. Or what to speak of the story of creation from the Big Bang. So, many times we joke about this. Like, have you ever put hot food in a blender? Have you ever done that? So the result was not some very nice preparation when you turned on the blender. The result was chaos. And we used to have a radio show of, the new building company that just brought in dynamite to a vacant lot. So like you put your stacks of lumber and your stacks of glass and all the parts of the building in a vacant lot and put some dynamite and blow it up, and there's a house. So this is again what the scientists asked us to believe. They asked us to believe that in the beginning of the universe, there was a spark that was infinitely small and infinitely dense. That alone is fantastic. And somehow, for reasons unknown, it exploded. That's fantastic. And when it exploded, it created the universe with its galaxies and solar systems and order in the universe. Such an orderly universe that we can predict the movements of the planets and stars thousands of years in advance. You cannot do that with airplanes. You cannot say, this plane is going to be at this place in the sky at exactly this second. Correct? Yes? Have you all been on airplanes? They don't necessarily take off and land exactly. Sometimes it'll say, landing at 5:34, but, that doesn't usually happen. But you can predict the movements of the planets and stars with this kind of accuracy. And this just randomly happened by an explosion. So these are all fantastical things, even from the scientists who deny the authority of the scriptures. Now, even if you were to go back in time, say 200 years or 250 years, and you were to tell people about our modern technological advancement, they wouldn't believe it. Correct? My late mother-in-law said that when she was growing up, that they were predicting television, and she thought, well, that's not possible. How are you going to transmit pictures? I can understand how you could transmit sound through space, but how could you possibly transmit pictures? So it seemed amazing and incredible. And what we can do now, the fact that we all have a powerful computer in our pocket that's more powerful than the computers that were used for satellites and space exploration back in the 50s and 60s, is practically, again, inconceivable. I can send documents electronically to people all over the world. I wouldn't have dreamed of such a thing as a child. And we would have said, oh, that can't be true. That's just science fiction. Now, in addition, there's a lot of subtle phenomena, like here, Kardama Muni not only is a great devotee, but he's a great yogi, although Prabhupada says his main qualification is as a devotee, not as a yogi, but he was a great yogi. And he knew how to manipulate subtle matter. So modern scientists say there is no such thing as subtle matter. There's no such thing as paranormal experiences. That's their public statement, but that's not their private conviction. So in America, near where I live, there's Duke University, and for many, many years, they actually had a whole department to study paranormal activity. And in the former Soviet Union, there was a huge branch of the military dedicated to this. So when the children I was teaching started to become teenagers, and I approached my late godbrother Sadaputta, who worked with the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and I said, a lot of these kids now are having doubts about these statements in the Shastra. And he said, well, you should find books for them that detail amazing experiences that are happening now in the world, or in fairly recent history, that no one can explain with modern science. So I was able to get, there was one experiment done in the USS Army, it's this horrific experiment, where they took very young baby rabbits and put them in a submarine, and then they had the mother rabbit in Moscow, and in the submarine they were killing the babies one by one while they were recording the brain waves of the mother rabbit in Moscow. And the mother rabbit's brain waves would change when the babies were killed in a submarine. So how is that possible if we just think about gross science? They also found this one blind woman who could read text with her hands, not braille, text. She could run her fingers over an ordinary book and read it. And so they wondered whether or not this was something that could be taught, and they found that it could. They took normally sighted people and thoroughly blindfolded them and were able to teach them how to recognize, how to see through their skin. Some of these experiments were just amazing, that how they could perceive different colors through their skin, even when the colors were in a box covered with glass. And when they asked these people, describe the colors, all the people they work with described the colors in the same way, like they would all describe certain ones as smooth or certain as bumpy or something like that, having certain tactile characteristics, although their hand was removed and through a glass barrier from the various colors. And then there's also people like there was the famous German Wolf Messing, who, because of Nazi persecution, ended up taking shelter in the Soviet Union under Stalin. And he used to make his money by doing mind reading, but he could actually read minds. And Stalin once tested him, and he said, I'm going to put you in my private home that has the top security, and I've told all of my security detail not to let you out of the building, and I want you to get out. And so he had the mystic power, naturally, he was born with it, of controlling other people's minds. So as he's walking out of Stalin's as super high, as high as security as you can get, he was telling people, I am the head of the Secret Service. I forget the guy's name. I am the head of the Secret Service. I am the head of the Secret Service. So when they saw him walk through, they thought he was somebody else. Stalin also once tested him. He said, I want you to rob a bank without any weapons. So he went into a bank with a blank piece of paper, and he mentally told the cashier, the teller, that this paper is a signed, notarized copy from the bank manager telling you to give me 100,000 rubles. And the person handed it over. So there are many, many instances of things that he did like that. When he was a teenager, he used to make money by going into a catatonic state for 3 days and then being part of a wax museum. He did spend some time in India where he saw yogis who could go into a catatonic state for like 3 months. And then Sadaputta, in researching his book, Alien Identities, found that there's so many people, thousands and thousands of people, at the present time, who give evidence of having met non-human intelligent life. Most of it demoniac, but some of it angelic. And he said if we throw out all this evidence, we would have to throw out all of human testimony, because a lot of this evidence was from very solid people. And a lot of their descriptions of this non-human intelligent life parallels that given in the Bhagavatam. And I could go on and on and on and on and on. There's physical structures in the world today that no one knows how they were built. So in South America, there's buildings on the tops of mountains with stone from quarries 200 miles away. It's like probably 400, 500 kilometers. And these stones weigh so much, there's no current equipment in the world that's capable of lifting them at all, anywhere. What to speak of such a distance up a mountain? How did the stones get there? And then they're put together with such precision and without mortar that you can't stick a needle or a credit card between the stones. So how were they cut like that? Again, we don't have any modern technology that can do this. We have no idea how this was done. There's a tribe in Africa that has knowledge of movements of stars that can only be seen with high-powered telescopes. And when they're asked, where did you get this knowledge? They say, oh, people from that star came to visit our ancestors thousands of years ago. And again, nobody can explain this. Now, this sort of information is not generally taught to children at school. When I went to school, I never heard about these buildings in South America. I never heard about this paranormal phenomena that's studied by governments and by universities. It's what we call the null curriculum. So when you teach things, there's 4 levels of curriculum. One is what you say you're going to do. Important. What do we say that we're teaching? The other is what you actually teach, which is never exactly the same as what you say you're going to teach. Now, there's a good and a bad reason for that. The good reason is that you have to modify your teaching according to the audience and the situation. So you should always modify it somewhat. And the bad reason is Maya, that we like to claim we're doing something that we're not really doing. Then there's the hidden curriculum. What you're teaching symbolically, what you're teaching by the way people behave in a classroom, what the rules are, what pictures are on the wall, how you give breaks, the language that you use. And that speaks much louder than the taught curriculum. Just like when I was a child going to school, all of our textbooks had only white people mostly with blonde hair and blue eyes and with Anglo-Saxon names. We never saw in our books pictures of people from other cultures, although the United States is a mix of people from cultures all over the world. We certainly never saw disabled people. And at a certain point, someone said, hey, we're teaching through the pictures. What is normal? And indirectly, we're teaching the children that anything outside of this is not normal. So that's a hidden curriculum. We have some hidden curriculum in ISKCON. Yes? Like if you go to Prabhupada's Pushpa Samadhi in Mayapur, so there's pictures of a Sankirtan party all around the Samadhi. What's missing? Women. Not one. Somehow, it was a Harinam where they said, no ladies allowed. But often people don't even notice that. I was giving a class at one temple in America with a GBC member there, who's also a personal friend of mine. And in front of me was just men. The ladies were all the way in the back behind the men. And afterwards I said to him, did you notice any symbolic teaching going on here in the way the temple room was? And he said, no, I didn't notice it. One time I was addressing a group of our leaders about organizational culture, and I was saying how we establish and change organizational culture. There's 6 subcategories. So we divided the leaders into 6 groups to look at each of these categories, and one of them was symbolism. And that group said, we don't have any symbolism in the Hare Krishna movement. And then beyond the hidden curriculum is what we call the null curriculum. The null curriculum is what you don't teach, what's taboo. And each of these is increasingly more powerful. The null curriculum is more powerful than the hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum is more powerful than the taught curriculum. And obviously that's more powerful than the planned or written curriculum. So because people growing up today have this null curriculum, it's just not discussed in school. They don't talk about these South American buildings. There's actually a building like that in Florida that was built recently, and they have no idea how the guy built it. They don't talk about paranormal phenomena. They don't talk about alien encounters. It's just not talked about. And because it's not talked about, and they don't admit how fantastic their own so-called logical, empirical, scientific research is, then when they go in front of people and say, all these the scriptures in the scripture, they're just fantastic. No one has any experience of them, and people go, that's right, because they haven't heard any of them. All right. Then we can say, well, God can do anything. It's kind of the definition of God. God can do anything. We can define God, that being who can do anything. And people have challenged, well, can he make a rock he can't lift? Right? Prabhupada was asked this question. People think they're so clever. And Prabhupada said, yes, he can make a rock he can't lift, and then he can expand himself and have the potency to lift it. Okay? He makes the laws, and he can act beyond the laws. That's even true in an ordinary business. Isn't that the case? So about a year ago, I bought a new refrigerator online, but I wasn't home. I was traveling. The idea was it was going to be delivered and be there when I got there. So one of the other ashram devotees and my granddaughter, they got it, they unpacked it, and then they sent pictures to me. It's all banged up. So I contacted the company with photographs, and I said, you know, the refrigerator came dented in 5 completely different places, like it was thrown around in the truck. You know. And then they put me through a whole rigmarole. Oh, you have to go to the manufacturer, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do the other thing. And customer service was taking me through this whole circular going nowhere. So then I looked up the CEOs of the company online. Who are the CEOs? And I wrote, on the advice of one of my kids, and I emailed to them, and I said, look, I've got 15,000 followers on social media, and this is what I'm going to write about your company. And then I'm going to write to such and such of a publication, which is where companies get reviewed for those who are thinking about buying stock in the company. So I'm going to write to that publication, and this is what I'm going to write about your customer service. Well, then something very interesting happened. Then when I called the company again, the person who picked up the phone was the supervisor's supervisor. Like they had my number changed in their log, you know, and I got this other guy. And he said, we'll pick it up tomorrow. We'll pick it up tomorrow, and we'll even give you a credit, and then we'll send you another one. Right? So then they sent another one, and that was banged up in 4 places. And I heard about that. I wasn't even by my computer. I was driving when my granddaughter says, okay, we got the second one, it's banged up in 4 places. I call the number. Immediately I get the supervisor. I said, the second one is banged up in 4 places. I said, do you want me to send you the pictures? Because before they're like, send me the pictures of the refrigerator, send me the pictures of the box, call the manufacturer, do this. This is all of our rules. I said, do you want me to send you pictures? He said, no, that's okay, we'll pick it up tomorrow. He said, do you want a refund or a new one? I said, I think at this point I just want a refund. Fine, we'll issue that to you tomorrow. We've all had experience like this, right? The front end person and maybe their supervisor just, this is our rule, that's what you have to do. Sorry, that's our policy. And then you get to the top people and they don't have to follow the rules. They can do what they like. Correct? Everyone's had this experience? So Krishna's the top, he's the supervisor. Ishvara Panama Krishna. First time I was in Prabhupada's presence when he was giving class, he was saying how everyone is a controller. Everyone controls something. And if you go to that controller, you get to the top where there's no more controller. Of course, Krishna lets himself be controlled by Mother Yasoda or Srimati Radharani or Sridham, but that's loving. He's not actually controlled. Or he wouldn't leave Vrindavan. That's his independence. So Krishna can do anything. And he's called Yogeshwar. So whatever great powers yogis can do, some yogis can create planets or destroy planets. But Krishna has all of the yogic powers, yes? And he creates time and space. The first thing he creates in this world is time. He's beyond time. And then from his glance of time, he agitates the material elements. And this first creates space. Think about that for a little bit. Time and space don't exist beyond this universe in any way that we think about them here at all. It's part of the illusion, time and space. There's this nice Brahma Samhita verse, Ekopya Sorachaitam Jaganandakoti Chaktarasti Jagananda Chayayaranta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam. So that Krishna is within the atom and the whole universe is in him. So I like to talk about this a lot because it's such a cool thing to think about. So you can think about how the universe is inside Krishna, right? We can all get a picture of that because we've seen the paintings. Mother Yasoda looks inside Krishna's mouth and she sees the universe. Okay, I can visualize that. Of course, she sees herself inside Krishna, and she's not seeing a picture of herself. She's actually seeing herself. And Lord Brahma talks about this. Oh, yes, it's right there. She's looking and seeing herself. Yeah, there we go. And Lord Brahma talks about this phenomena in his prayers in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. He said, she saw me within your belly, so I am also in your belly, but yet I'm talking to you outside. How is that? All right, then we understand that Krishna is in every atom. We can also, do we have any paintings of that here? So we also have seen paintings like that, like all these little atoms with super soul inside them. Yes, everyone's seen these paintings? Okay, so we can picture that. So Krishna's in the atom, okay? So then you look inside Krishna and there's a universe. Okay, you got that? And in the universe it's made up of atoms, and Krishna's inside those atoms, but the universe is inside, wait a minute, can you get that? No, our mind goes like zip, zip, zip. So he's inconceivable. Krishna controls time and space. He's beyond time and space. So anything that's possible to be done can be done. And as we mentioned yesterday, and this is also the point here being made in this verse, if you're connected with the Lord, then you can also do anything. Because the Lord can empower you to do anything. The Lord can act through you to do anything. And as we said yesterday, Krishna is completely non-envious. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, no one's my friend and I don't envy anyone. He doesn't envy anyone. And anyone, as we were saying yesterday, who he trusts to act for his interest, he can empower them with all of his powers if he wants. That a living entity can be a Shaktivesh avatar. They can act with all as if they were God. We were reading yesterday from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Gopakumar is with the 4 Kumaras, they're displaying in their own bodies so many different incarnations of Vishnu. So that someone who's connected with the Lord can do anything is not astonished because the Lord can do anything. All right, but generally devotees don't act like that. Like it really has struck me how Vasudeva, in talking to Krishna, when Krishna appears in Kamsa's prison, he says, I'm an ordinary living entity conditioned by the 3 modes of nature. How is it you've appeared as my child? Because Prabhupada's emphasizing in today's purport that Kardama Muni is not conditioned by the modes of nature, even though apparently he's enjoying this world. Kardama Muni also, when he asked the Lord for a wife, he said, Lord, I really shouldn't be asking you for a wife. I should be asking you for pure devotional service, but because I'm fallen and I'm conditioned, I'm asking you for a wife. So the devotees are thinking like that. They're not thinking, well, I'm a pure devotee who has the full mercy and trust of the Lord, so I can just do anything. That's not their mentality. They're thinking, I'm just an ordinary fallen living entity. And whatever potency the Lord gives me, they're grateful, like, wow, the Lord has given me some potency out of his mercy. Even though I'm so fallen, even though I'm so unqualified. That's how they're thinking. And when that happens, the devotees are just like, wow. And that's exactly what happened with Govardhana Muni. Remember when he created this flying city, flying village, with thousands of people in it? And he looks at it and goes, wow, I can't believe I actually did that. So that's how the devotee feels. Should I tell you a personal story? Should I tell you a personal story? So I was in Vrindavan. I had been teaching all morning and all afternoon at the VIHE. And so I was kind of done with my teaching ability for the day. Like my brain was tired and it's like, okay, I'm just kind of done. And some devotees came up to me and they said, it's Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj's Tir Abhav today. Would you please come to the celebration in Krishna Balaram Hall? And probably because I'd had a long day and I'd just eaten a big meal and I was tired, it didn't occur to me that they were inviting me to speak there. Somehow I just didn't think of that. So I thought, oh, they're inviting me to be in the audience. So I'm sitting there. I go into Krishna Balaram Hall and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to a few people speak. And again, it didn't cross my mind they're going to ask me to speak. And Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj was a personal friend of our family. But still, I just didn't think of it. And then they said, would you come up and speak? So generally, I try to prepare for my classes, if I can. I do my best to prepare. I mean, sometimes I only have 5 minutes. And sometimes I have weeks to prepare. So here I had no preparation, and I didn't even have a few seconds to prepare, and I was tired, and my brain was tired. And I just went internally, Krishna, help! I mean, I always ask Krishna to help, but I usually try to do my part too, you understand? Like Arjuna practices shooting arrows. He doesn't just go on the battlefield without practice and say, Krishna, help. He spent a long time learning how to shoot bows and arrows. He would even practice at night. So I ask Krishna to help, but I also do my part. Right? Yes? Right. Okay. But then I couldn't do my part. So I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to say. I have no idea. Just like, Krishna, you're just going to have to do this. And that whole time I was speaking, probably about 5 or 10 minutes, I felt like I was sitting in the audience watching myself. And I will tell you, I gave the best speech I have ever given in my entire life. I wish I had recorded it. It was amazing. And all the time I'm like listening to myself going, wow, okay, you did this right. Wow, that's amazing. And then I sat down, I'm like, Krishna, you're just so totally cool. And I remember after the program, the organizers came up to me and they said, would you come to Manipur and speak? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to do what I did today. Like, if you expect that, that's not going to happen. But I'm sure you've all had similar experience, right? When Krishna does something wonderful through you. When you're just like, how did I do that? I didn't have the ability to do that. I didn't know that. Like, wow, Krishna's just so cool. Or when Krishna does things for us, yes? Years ago in Auckland, I remember walking to my room and thinking, I haven't had cashews in a long time. I'd like some cashews. And there on my door was a bag of cashews. Right? Did these things happen to you? Maybe not every day or every week or every month, but they happen, yes? So when Krishna works through us and uses us as his instrument in some far-out, amazing way. Indradumna Swami recently wrote something about that with meeting some big dignitary because of a series of circumstances that he realized he couldn't have arranged himself, that he didn't possibly have the connections to arrange it, and Krishna just arranged it. So when Krishna works through us, or when Krishna does something for us, right? We don't have the mentality of, I'm going to display mystic power by manifesting cashews on my doorknob. Cashews, manifest. Right? That's not the devotee's not in that frame. Right? And of course, Krishna always enjoys manifesting things through devotees that are humble. He seems to get a particular thrill out of doing that. So when the devotees feel incompetent, like Prabhupada said in his poem, I don't know what I'm doing here. What am I doing in this Rajagun, Tamagun place? Who's going to listen to me? But you're the puppet master. You just make me dance as you like. And Prabhupada always saw that. My guru is empowering me, Krishna is empowering me. So these things in the scriptures, we shouldn't doubt them. There's actually wonderful things happening in the world all the time. Of course, Prabhupada said when we're preaching to the public, we shouldn't immediately preach the far out portions. Like a devotee asked Prabhupada, how do we explain King Ugrasena having 4 quadrillion bodyguards? Madhavananda recently published something about that. That's actually in the spiritual world, not on the earth planet. But anyway, the devotee said, Prabhupada, how do we explain this? And Prabhupada said, why are you teaching people this portion? So we don't go to the public and say, okay, I'd like you to believe that someone had 4 quadrillion bodyguards and that someone else made a flying city with parks and gardens. That's not our first preaching to people. But when people encounter this sort of thing in the scriptures, we can say, there's so many wonderful things in this world. Maybe they didn't teach you that in school because doesn't comport with the modern idea of mechanistic science. And certainly God can do anything. So anyone who's connected with the Lord can also do anything. That doesn't mean that we just sit around being lazy, waiting for miracles. We work in the world as if we're ordinary people who have to do things in ordinary ways. And when Krishna works through us, or when Krishna does some miracles for us, then we're very grateful. And we're just appreciative. Oh, how wonderful my Lord is. So we can think about when we have so many things that we're going to do today, even our ordinary abilities. Krishna says he's our ability. Krishna says on the intelligence of the intelligent, whenever we do something smart, right? And we go, oh, that was smart. That's Krishna. Krishna is the wisdom of the wise. He's all of our ability to sit, to speak, to think, to see. And we can appreciate the wonders that are around us, even the amazing mystical things that are around us that we can't explain. Prabhupada says milk production is mystical, right? How does the cow turn grass into milk? Prabhupada said, how does your wife make milk? And he says, you cannot feed your wife grass and have her make milk. That's mystical. Nobody really knows how that's done. So we can appreciate these wonderful things. How does digestion take place? Krishna says he's the fire of digestion. So they're probably going to have khichdi today, right? Probably, yeah. And yesterday we had khichdi, and today that khichdi is our fingernail. How did that happen? How did Krishna change beans and rice into our nose and our fingernails and our hair? We can appreciate the wonders of Krishna all around us, all of the things that we take for granted that are actually miraculous, and grow in that appreciation and that gratitude throughout the day. So, thank you very much. If there's any questions, comments, additions, subtractions, chastisements, corrections. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for your class. I'm just wondering how you would respond to the argument that, well, you're using scriptural statements to support scriptural statements. This is simply circular reasoning.
Give me an example of how we're using scriptural statements to support scriptural statements.
Well, you say Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead because Scripture says so.
Oh, okay. So you'd like me to establish that Krishna is the Lord without reference to Scripture?
Well,
I have a class like that.
That's what they claim.
Okay, well, so we can. There's a limit to logic, but we can establish a lot through logic. So, is there a creator that you can establish logically? right? Like you're all sitting on these cushions. Are those very simple things? Like, are they really, 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 really simple? Yes, they're simple? Okay. Did they require intelligence? And they probably required a whole resource chain. Although putting them together required intelligence, your 2-year-old couldn't do it, and a chimpanzee couldn't do it. You'd have to probably be at least 8 years old to do something like that. But there was still, making them is extremely complex. I saw a video the other day of what it takes to make a pencil. It's extremely complex. It's actually a global thing, just you buy a pencil. So what to speak of a tree? A bug? How could it not have a creator? That's logic. And a maintainer. How are the planets not crashing? Somebody's got to be running the show. Okay, can we say about what's the nature of that creator and maintainer? Well, it must be a super intelligent and super creative. Someone who really likes beauty. Someone who really likes variety. I like to say Krishna's a variety man. So you can see any of the plants outside. We have some plants there by the Vyasa-san. So you can look at those or the plants outside. On one plant, are there any 2 leaves exactly the same? That's weird, isn't it? Like if I were going to make plants, I would just do all the leaves the same. Snowflakes. Who even looks at all the snowflakes? I didn't know if I was going to use snowflakes here because it never snows here. So I figure some people here have never seen snow. But yeah, every grain of sand? I once made this point and one of my godbrothers said, "Are you going to tell me every grain of sand is different?" I'm like, yeah, look it up. Look up every grain of sand. They're not only each different, they're each gorgeous. And 2 plants are not the same. The amount of variety in this world is absolutely beyond comprehension. Who's ever running the show really likes variety. I mean, to an extreme. We can say whoever's running things is very orderly, but also surprising and unpredictable. So we can depend on the earth, usually, but there might be an earthquake or a volcano, you never quite know. You can depend on the seasons, usually, but sometimes things are unseasonal and surprise you. We can know that whoever's running the show seems to like attachment and affection. It's all over the place. It's everywhere. Even in very minute species. It's there in the trees. There's this book I read a few years ago called The Secret Life of Trees, how trees communicate with each other under the ground. And if you cut off a tree and just leave a stump, sometimes new growth will come out of the tree. How does that happen? You know how it happens? The other trees around it are feeding it through the roots because it can't make its own food through photosynthesis. The trees they're taking care of, oh my God, those humans came and cut you down. We'll take care of you until you can grow again. There's affection among plants. It's everywhere. So whoever created anything must really like affection and attachment and love. It's what powers everything. They must also like competition. Nature is very competitive. So they must like cooperation, they must like competition. And it's got to be one person ultimately in charge. This is the logical arguments of the Yamadutas to Yamaraj. They said, we thought you were the head honcho, and you were superseded by, these messengers superseded our authority. They said, and we know there can't be 2, because if there's 2 people in charge, then they may contradict each other. Some people will get both punished and rewarded, or neither, because 2 people are never going to absolutely agree about everything. So you can't have everything run by a committee. There must be one. And perhaps there's more we can understand logically, but then our logic kind of stops there. Now, if you're going to understand what color God is, what form God is, what his abode is, the only way you're going to know that is if you could meet him in person or if you could meet somebody who met him in person. So that's where you're going to faith. That's where you're going beyond Pratyaksha and Anuman, and you're going to faith. And then our point would be, okay, there are millions of people in the history of the world who claim to have had direct perception of this creator and maintainer. Am I correct? Millions of people throughout history. How do they describe him? Then you'll notice that none of these descriptions are exactly the same. That points to the fact that this creator and maintainer must be a person. When it comes to an object, if we're going to describe this, we could all come up with identical explanations. But if we're going to describe a person, if everyone here was going to describe you, we would all describe you somewhat differently, correct? When we're describing a person, it's somewhat subjective. But we are going to find some parallels in these descriptions. Even if you read like the Song of Solomon, where there's a description of the form of the Lord, it's very, very similar to the form, the descriptions of Maharaj Chitraketu meeting Sankarsana. Almost parallel. And then you can meet God yourself and you can get your own experience. You don't have to just trust the scriptures. And the process for meeting God is not really that different in any religious tradition. You pray alone and in a group, often with song. You meditate. You're grateful. You connect things with the Lord, especially your food. You have some kind of ceremony that involves usually fire of some sort, and often something with nice fragrances. You observe festivals. Go to any tradition, you're going to find something similar. You observe festivals that are connected with their holy places and their saints. You visit their holy places, and you'll have an experience of God. And you can meet him yourself, which is the ultimate evidence. Pratyakcha vagamam dharmam susukham kartamami. Now, you can choose any tradition to find God, but since you have to devote yourself solidly to one tradition, if you're eclectic, then, it might not work. Like you need to dig a well deeply in one place. If you want to get a degree, you have to go to one institution. So you might look in advance, how is each tradition describing God? And see objectively whether our scriptures are giving a more attractive, more complete description of God. That you can decide. If you want to go to a tradition that just says God is great, he's beyond the world. He's nothing like the world is nothing like him. He's great, he's merciful. Full stop, that's it. So you could try to find God in that tradition. But how much easier if you try to find God in a tradition that gives you something very specific to meditate on. Venam kamantam aravinda dalaya taksham. Bhagavatam samasitam buddhasundaranga. So try that. You can find the same God through other traditions. I know a Buddhist who meditated for 20 years and saw Krishna playing his flute. So that can happen through any bona fide tradition. But it might be faster and easier if you go to a tradition that already has such a description. At least give it a try. And doesn't Krishna describe the kind of God that you would want God to be anyway? Do you want to find God who's just a pillar of smoke and a pillar of fire and beyond description and just gets really angry? And is that like your thing? So that would be my answer. Is that all right? That's all right? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. And we need to end here because people are getting hungry and the line's going to be long and they won't get any khichdi. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anything good in this presentation is from Srila Prabhupada and the Shastra, and anything bad is from me. Please take the good and leave aside.